But you guys are splitting the difference where you're like, hey, you can have some alcohol right here. This isn't a zero sum game. It's not binary, right?
Right? Like maybe it doesn't have to be so extreme. The answer might not be none. Maybe the answer is some, but that wasn't really available. But what we know is that people that are drinking non-alcoholic beer, almost 93% of them still drink alcohol. So they're looking for less. They're not looking for none. And our proposition is to give you the best of both worlds, to let you land on that, hopefully ideal amount.
Is that much of it? That's not much of a change for you, right?
My name is Carey Kight. I used to load bombs in the Air Force, and now I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. Through using the post 9/11 GI Bill to go to college, working hourly jobs to pay the bills, and freelancing my way into a career, I've studied what it takes to successfully transition from service to civilian, and that study has become a conversation. On this podcast, I speak to other veterans, successful artists, and entrepreneurs about their transition, what they did well, where they failed, what they learned, and most importantly, how they applied their skills. Episode 128 features my good friend and colleague, Ryan Kutscher, the co-founder of Dad Strength Brewing, a low ABV craft brewery. Ryan is an award-winning advertising creative responsible for some of advertising's most talked about campaigns over the last 20 years. He's a serial entrepreneur who has scaled multiple large agencies and founded 2 small agencies himself, Circus Maximus, where I worked for him, and Launch Party, where we often collaborate on campaigns to launch brands and products. Welcome. This is Veteran Made. This episode is brought to you by Go Pills, a nootropic that gives your brain neurotransmitter support both acutely and over time. Those of us that served in the military, regardless of where we served and in what capacity we served, all came into contact with different chemicals, different percussions, and various elements of our environments that have affected our brain's ability to function. Think about your brain's performance and your mental health right now, yes, but think about your future too. We have so much more control over our long-term health than we realize. Visit gopills.com and use code VM15 at checkout for 15% off. That's VM15 for 15% off. Give your brain the neurotransmitter support it needs to perform well right now and over time.
All right. Good morning from the great state of Ohio. For me, good morning from our nation's capital, the District of Columbia. Ryan Kutscher, welcome to Veteran Made.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Been a long time coming. You and I've worked together for several years now, and we always joke, man, we just need to record these conversations because we talk about so much good stuff. So I'm glad that you're finally here and we're finally doing it.
Yep.
If you could just give the audience a brief primer on who you are and where and when you've worked over the last decade plus, and then we'll jump into Dad Strength Brewing.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ryan Kutscher. I spent a lot of my career in advertising. At the beginning of my career, I worked at large agencies, many that your audience probably wouldn't know. And then I started my own agency about 12 years ago. It was called Circus Maximus. 2 years ago, I rebranded that as Launch Party to help brands launch. And then that was so exciting, I decided to launch my own brand, which is called Dad Strength Brewing, which launched in July of this year. And that's why I'm in Washington, D.C., and we could talk more about it. But I think in sum, I guess maybe I'm an entrepreneur. I who knows?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, for those listening, Ryan's not a veteran, but I've worked for him and with him quite a bit over the last decade or so. And I think that your journey as an entrepreneur and the multiple transitions that you've had both within the advertising space and your career, and then making the transition into owning, operating, launching your own brand here, I think is going to be very valuable for a lot of the creative entrepreneurs in our audience, as well as a lot of the CPG entrepreneurs in our audience in the veteran community. There's been a big push, since Black Rifle Coffee launched. They really started an interesting trend for veterans to get into the entrepreneurial space and launch their own brands. And as you know, I like to buy American. I like to buy veteran. And so I've gotten to know a lot of those entrepreneurs who've come on the show over the years. And then, also make it a point to buy a lot of those products. And so that's, I think, the genesis of this conversation and why I think it'll be valuable for you, the audience. So Ryan, I'd love to start with advertising. You've talked to me and the agency over the years about how you got into it and your freelancing and the way that you approached it coming out of ad school, and you scaled pretty quickly at a large agency, and then we're freelancing kind of all over the place. I think it'd be really valuable for folks to hear what your mindset and what your approach was, out of college and out of ad school, and as you were getting started as a freelancer.
Yeah. Well, getting into advertising was sort of a combination of luck and desperation because I was in college and I was studying economics and I thought maybe I would go work in finance. My dad worked in finance and basically it was one of three knowable careers. Just like business generally, finance specifically, accounting or law. And since accounting and law were never going to be in the cards, I was going to do some vague business thing. And I remember having an internship at Solomon Smith Barney, which is an investment bank that I don't think exists anymore. And was living in New York City with a good friend of mine, and kind of having a panic attack every morning as I walked across Central Park South and got to the office smelling like horse crap because there's all the horse carriages and just being like miserable, smelling like horse crap, wondering what I was going to do with my life. And by accident, I received an email from the business school at my college. That was in between junior and senior year. And this college class was for a 1-credit class in advertising. And the guy that taught the class was a madman, Don Draper type dude from the 80s. And the second he walked in, I was like, wait a minute, all you have to do is make things up and make commercials. That's easy. Let's do that. And so from there, it was kind of discovering like the path towards how you do that. And it's a pretty loose journey. At the time you would go to kind of a portfolio school, which were not accredited universities or anything like that. They're basically like in someone's basement. And you create a portfolio of fake ads being the only ads less interesting than real ads. And you basically create a portfolio, you start sending it out to all these ad agencies and you hope they think that you're clever. And as it turns out, like the school that I went to, sorry, my dog is here. I might have to do something. All good. Was in Miami. And at the time, the teachers from a really kind of fast growing, interesting agency in Miami were teaching the classes that I was taking. And I ended up dropping out of the school and taking an unpaid internship at this agency on a whim because I just needed to get out of kind of school and into some version of the real world. So we jumped in as an intern. I ended up getting hired. And because of the way the trajectory of that agency, how fast it was growing and how kind of interesting it was in the industry at the time, I was able to get just a ton of reps and, kind of a warp zone type job. So 5 years at that agency and it was, 5 years at that agency and it was basically like almost a career's worth of experience.
Yeah.
And, through that process, I mean, I had these little like kind of goals along the way, which was like, oh, it'd be really cool to make an ad. Then it would be really cool to make a campaign, which is a group of ads. Then it would be cool to do that across multiple clients. Then it would be cool to be a group creative director. Then it would, so you kind of like, that was just a little journey or the path that I saw unfolding once I got into advertising. And it was this constant sort of like, ooh, I wonder if I could do a little bit more kind of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, a couple things of value there. I think, we recently last year, we had a copywriter down in New Orleans at Peter Mayer. His name's Joe Tate. Audience might remember, Marine vet, young dude. He went to an ad school and then dropped out of the program because he got a similar opportunity as you were describing. And he was talking about how his classmates were like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you don't have another degree. Why are you dropping out of this program? And he was like, literally the whole point of this program is to get a job. I got a job. I'm going to go do the work. And, in the military, we call it OJT, on the job training. That's the best training that you're going to get is on the job, not, philosophy or, concepting from professors about then how to concept and execute, right? It's about getting in, doing the work, learning from people that are already doing it, people that have been doing it. And like you said, getting in at the ground level and then working your way up, right? Chunking it out one piece of the career at a time with an eye towards building the career.
Yeah. And I think the theme is like, I had the same sort of vibe of like, I'm not at this ad school because I'm super stoked to be at ad school. I had been at college for 4 years and had an education that I graduated with, realizing was effectively useless But yeah, I mean, the realization was like, what's valuable about this experience? And is it getting me closer to where I want to go and literally do the thing
Right.
that I'm trying to do? Not learn about it, not practice it, but actually do it. And so dropping out of ad school to take an internship was definitely getting me one step closer to doing it. You know, certainly after an unpaid internship, you want to get paid for it. But that's kind of the theme. And like, there's a lot of, in life, I think there's just a lot of, there's a lot of distraction and noise that makes it seem like you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing, but you're not, particularly in the world of advertising, which is a lot of like people sitting in a conference room, not doing anything.
Right. Yeah. You talked about those knowable careers when you were in college. I think that's for the veteran audience. That's a very similar feeling that we all have, right? You're serving, whether it's 4 years like myself or 20 plus years for those that made it a career and retired, right? Like there's this idea of knowable careers and what's available to you based on your past experience, based on what you're quote unquote qualified for, and not necessarily what you're interested in and then want to go get good at, right? I think a lot of people get trapped in this idea of, I want to do this thing, I'm interested in this thing, but I don't know if I have the aptitude. Well, the only way to find aptitude is to go do it. But yeah, just
we were talking about the knowable careers,
right? And being interested in something and not knowing if you're qualified for it, not knowing if you have the aptitude for it, right? But you have to go find those opportunities, and the only way to learn if you have aptitude is to go get in and do some of the work to work towards it, right? Like if it's something you're interested in and something you have a baseline aptitude for, get in there and start doing it. Don't just settle for what these knowable careers are, right? If it's somebody like yourself who goes to college out of high school, there's a certain set of expectations for military service members and veterans. There's a certain set of expectations. It's like you need to, and for the veterans, that you're in control of what your options are. You can't just settle for what the DoD tells you you're qualified for, what the DoD tells you your GI Bill options are, what the DoD tells you that your work options are through these programs. These programs are great, but you have to go take responsibility for yourself. And I think that's obviously true for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I won't speak to knowing all that much about the military, but like if you're thinking about college, a university, higher education, those things that I mentioned, business, law, accounting, kind of business, if you're going in the medical field, they're knowable, which is why your parents are like, do that, because I know what it is. I know how the video game levels work. You get the degree, we'll level up. You get the job, level up. You pay your Social Security and you get a good salary, and it's reliable. And in the military, I suspect it's probably like you're signing up for some kind of a structure. And whatever discipline that you're in, like I want to be a Ranger or I want to be a Navy SEAL. Obviously, those are like, movie examples, but it's like even within that, it's like, oh, I want to be in operations or I want to be in engineering or whatever the track is. There's a structure that allows you to kind of move your way through it. When I think in the real world, there might not be that, and your path to happiness is something that you kind of have to create for yourself, and that's a very lonely, confusing, sometimes depressing, challenging, rewarding, awesome, amazing, creative way to live your life. And I was talking with a friend of mine he's the CEO of a company and he's an entrepreneur too. And I was like, why are we like this?
Yeah.
Why do we have to be like this?
Yeah.
Why can't I be happy going to a job that is predictable, that asks 40% of my capabilities? I give them 30. I go on vacation 3 times a year, and I get my Social Security and I get a regular paycheck and everything's cool. And I can't do that.
Right.
And so there's a lot of people that can't do that. And certainly my career has kind of been a reflection of my inability to just be normal.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to go, ad by ad, campaign by campaign, position by position in your career, but what was scaling in advertising like for you? As you set the system and the framework of unpaid internship, get hired, you saw the hierarchy, right? Ad, campaign, and then you kind of, worked your way up to overseeing teams and executing multiple campaigns at a time. How did you, I would say quickly, because I want to get into building Dad Strength Brewing, but how did you execute on that system and that framework and that hierarchy that you observed as you got into it? And what did you learn about yourself along the way?
That's a good question. I mean, I think at the very basic level, it was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I made a print ad for one of our clients? And that's a very defined, knowable 8.5 by 11 headline at the top, bunch of copy on it. And that was for IKEA. And I was like, hey, I did it. I wrote a headline, it ran. And then you have this thing that was in the back of a magazine that you're going like, well, 3 weeks ago, there was nothing. And then there was this idea, and then there was the execution of the idea, and then it was delivered into this mag. So it was like, okay, well, it's some version of that, And then it was like, well, it would be really cool to make a TV commercial, and that's just the same thing, but 30 seconds long and a lot of blabbing. And so, kind of parsing out, what does it take to make these different pieces of creative content, and what does the output look like? And then kind of layering, understanding that like, oh, well, an ad is typically just a piece of a campaign. So a campaign is kind of this larger idea, a communications platform that allows you to say multiple things. Like you're saying the same thing multiple ways. And kind of like batch process, grouping them together, chunking them together. And then knowing like, oh, I'm capable of kind of coming up with these ideas that have multiple components to them, multiple pieces of a campaign. Maybe what I could do is like come up with campaigns for a client while also helping other people kind of develop that same, knowledge of how to create ad campaigns. And then it was doing it for multiple clients. So you're just kind of like breaking down this sort of giant industry into like pieces that you then create almost standard operating procedures for. You teach yourself, then you teach someone else, and that's kind of the waterfall effect. And then it was, it'd be cool to be able to like go into a room with strange people that are your potential clients and win them over such that they want to give you their business. And that's when it started to really click of like, it's not just this activity of creating content, it's a business transaction that like, if I say the right things and unlock the right, code here, those people want to give me money to do this work. And then it was like, oh, that's a business, solving a problem with a solution that people are willing to pay you for. And then that's what kind of started to get my more entrepreneurial juices flowing.
Yeah, I mean, what's been obviously I've worked at a lot of small agencies over the years, and then now as a vendor with our production company, working for a lot of small and large agencies as we produce these campaigns. I think one of the key differences between you and other, creative directors or chief creative officers or ECDs, whatever, bullshit titles we in the advertising industry want to apply to people, is that you view it as a business and you view it as a transaction, not in the impersonal sense, but very much in the personal sense. You need something, client. Myself and my team can provide that for you. Here's what it costs. Here's how long it takes. Here's what we can do. And we're going to hit all the strategic frameworks that you need to hit. And the creative is going to do what it needs to do. And then the produced deliverables are going to do what the creative said the strategy needs it to do.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of creatives that I've worked with and honestly still work with, they're obsessed with the art and they're obsessed with the final piece. And they're obsessed with working with the biggest directors and the celebrity directors and the celebrity talent. There's value in those things. Certain campaigns require that. But I've noticed over the years, your mindset is different. It's not about what can I add to my book so that I look good. It's what can I add to my book to prove to my current clients and potential clients that the work we do works. When did that business approach start for you?
A good question.
Because it's unique. I mean, you are singularly unique in that way. I mean, I haven't worked with every creative director on the planet, but I mean, you're kind of one in that sense.
Probably some level of like kind of indignation of being an employee in a fast growing agency, sort of going like, so what's happening here is I'm coming to work, 15 hours a day, 70 hours a week, cranking out these campaigns, and this C-suite level, someone owns this business, and it ain't me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm creating the work that they're selling and taking the majority of the profits and distributing how much income they think I'm supposed to get for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, screw that. How do I get that job, or how do I take that position? And in order for me to do that, I got to figure out how the money flows through this box we call a business. And in order to do that, you needed to understand that the thing that you're creating has a level of value, and you're trying to assign a value to that and come to some agreement with your client that the value is, we agree upon this value, therefore you're going to pay me for it. So it was like kind of abstract and a little bit outside looking in, but it was like, yeah, I mean, creating ads is fun, it's creative, but at the same time, it was like, man, I'm working awfully hard here. And the idea of going to a business where you have to ask someone for more money or ask someone for time off or ask someone for anything, at a certain point in my life, I was like, this sucks. I would rather figure out how to make the money-making thing and do it myself than sit in this kind of safe space where I'm making, whatever salary. I wanted the responsibility, the challenge of figuring that out. And it was just, yeah, I mean, not everyone wants to do that. But it's just like you see, like, or you just meet people. Sometimes they're older than you. Sometimes they're younger than you. Sometimes they're more creative. Sometimes you're like, that's all you do. You meet people, they have these businesses, and you're like, man, you figured it out. Like, that's to me is the ultimate challenge of working in capitalism. Is like, how do you the ultimate creativity is like, how do I come up with an idea that becomes a business that I own or that I have part ownership in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, that's like the fundamental, question that I guess I ultimately, because you're showing people in the world of advertising, you walk into a room and you show them a ton of ideas as to how they could run their business better. So you're so close to like being fundamentally a part of that business. Now they can fire you at any time or not pay you or all these things, but you're like, it's like being a driving instructor where you're like, turn left, turn right, more gas. And you're like, why don't I just, if you could move over, I'll just drive. You know what I mean? Like something like that, like bad analogy. But yeah, the curiosity of like, well, why don't I just be the guy that owns the thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably answers your question from earlier. It's like, why are you the way that you are? And it's that right there. It's that, right? And for entrepreneurs out there, creative or otherwise, like you're going to develop the skills and experiences that you need to have to be successful in whatever industry by doing, right? I think we put too much of a primer on learning in this abstract sense from other people that are quote unquote experts.
Yeah.
When in reality, you need to get in at the ground level and work where the experts are actually working and work with them to see, all right, here's a gap that I need to close that me working next to, with, or for this person will help me close so that I can get one step closer to doing what it is that I want to do the way that I want to do it.
It's education is terrific and I don't want to sound like I'm sort of anti-education or anything like that. But there's this great quote that I saw, which is like, someone less qualified than you is making money doing the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Or some version of that was basically like, you could distract yourself with thinking that you need to be sort of qualified in some kind of a way or receive a degree to do something. or some level of education, when in fact what you need to do is just start doing it.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, like teaching and mentoring other people as a part of that process, right? Where you're doing and learning, and then teaching, and then doing and learning again, and then teaching and doing and learning again. When I was working for you at Circus Maximus, early days, it was just me producing. And then we won enough scopes that we're like, hey, we're forecasted for enough work that we can start to hire teams. And right. So the creative team was hiring their folks, and I was hiring the producers that we hired. And I very distinctly remember a conversation. Remember where I was in my apartment in Jersey City when we were having it. I remember I called you and I was like, hey man, these two people that I just hired do things better than I do at the level that we need them to do it, which then frees me up to help build the business and work on some of those other things. And again, continue to mentor and teach, and then continue to learn myself. And then we just kind of ping ponged up the ladder.
Yeah. I mean, it's history, because we're having a conversation about the entrepreneurial kind of inclination. And I think it's important to understand that not everyone has that.
Right.
Not everyone wants that.
Yep.
Some people just are really good at the thing that they're really good at. But if you have even a little bit of that, like, oh, I wonder if I could, I have a vision for something. Most really, even like Richard Branson will tell you the refrain of like, if you want to do something, it's your job to create a crystal clear vision for what it is that you're trying to do. And then you hire people that are better at it than you, and you motivate them to help do it. But your job is to articulate that vision. And yes, it requires a lot of like learning, but it's this dynamic of how do you create a business in which you have a very particular personality or vision for the world, and then the people that you're hiring maybe aren't that way.
Yep.
And you have to bridge the gap, and that's management. And I'm terrible at that.
I wouldn't say you're terrible at it. I mean, because that conversation was a inflection point for me, where I was able to let go of some of the ego that I had. Like I've now since realized I'm actually not very good at a lot of things in this industry at the tactical level. Plus, I'm actually not that interested in doing those things at the tactical level. But I look back as I transitioned out of the military and then out of film school and got into advertising. I was like, okay, I got to do some of these things really well that I'm not that good at, that I'm not that interested in order to get to the place that I want to be, to do the things that I am good at, which is leading these teams of creatives and producers and directors and shooters and editors and all of these things. And so now I'm at this spot in my career where I really get to do the things that I want to do. However, I just received an RFP this morning that's going to take me back to go do something that I'm not, technically that interested in doing, but it's revenue and opportunity. So I'm going to go in and do that work if we win it. Right. And then it's back to that ping ponging, right? Sometimes you're doing, sometimes you're teaching, sometimes you're learning, but really you're doing it all at once.
Yeah. And I mean, I think to some extent, what you're describing is that the journey is very personal in a lot of ways, in that you have to learn a lot about yourself, what you're good at, what motivates you, what you're not good at, what you want to do, what you can do, what you can't do, what you don't want to do. And everything is trying to get you much more close to that truth, I guess, about yourself, that puts you in your perfect position, and lets you be in your lane while interfacing with everyone else that you're bringing into the mix, to help you do it. And that's why I think it's like, I always wondered, I was like, there's these guys and they're really successful entrepreneurs. Maybe let's say they make $1 million, $10 million, $1 billion. And then they do it again. And you're like, why would you do it again? And it's like, well, the goal isn't necessarily the financial outcome. It's this sort of journey of the real treasure is the friends we made along the way, or like the journey of self-discovery. And that is kind of appealing, is that along the path, you're learning a lot about yourself, you're developing new skills, you're constantly interfacing with other people that are teaching you things. And so, yeah, that's a big part of it is that personal journey of growth and education. And hopefully expanding and realizing that you're capable of a lot more than what you thought you were, you know?
It's the whole person concept, right? Like as an entrepreneur, you're not just doing work that you want to do, but you're living a life that you want to live, right? And creating that for yourself. And you have to think about yourself and your profession both separately and in an integrated way, because you are you and you do your profession. And so sometimes the profession needs to take a little bit of primacy. Sometimes the person needs to take a little bit of primacy, but you have to figure out how to weave your way through it. And if you view yourself as what you do, you're going to fail. If you view yourself as incapable of doing certain things, you're going to fail. You have to fail forward, right? In that sense.
Yeah. And I think outside of like tangible outcomes or tangible structures, like we talked about, whether that's military or education or industry or whatever, you need to have kind of this like crystal clear vision in your own mind for what your life looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds a little woo woo, but it's literally the thing. It's like the only template you have to measure your own success is like, am I close to the way that I want to be living my life? Or am I far away from it? What am I currently doing that's getting me closer? What am I currently doing that's taking me further away from it? And you know, you some version of that is reiterated by people that are really good at it, whether that's Steve Jobs or Warren Buffett has the thing of like, take the 25 things that you want to accomplish in this life, write them down, and then cross out the bottom 20. Yeah. And I was listening to Johnny Ive talking about a version of that focus. I mean, he was talking about what made Steve working with and for Steve Jobs so compelling, and the idea of sacrifice, which was like Steve would come into him and say, like, have you said no to anything today? And in the same way of like take the top 25 things that you want to do and chop off the bottom 20, Johnny Ive was talking about there's a lot of good ideas, meaningful and worthy ideas, things that you want to accomplish that you have to say no to in favor of the one most important thing that's closest to that vision in your head of how you see your life. And that's really hard to, to realize, which is like, oh, I'm not just saying no to things that I don't want to do. I'm saying no to like really good ideas, in your example of like, man, if I really want this company to be what I think it should be, do I need to say no to this opportunity that's going to pay me X amount of dollars, that's kind of take me back to where I used to be in my comfort zone? And, I know how I could do it in my sleep and it's an easy paycheck. Maybe I need to say no to that. And that stuff's really hard.
Yeah. If you want to do anything, you can't do everything. You can't. So it's not possible.
Yeah, and it was the nuance, the distinction of like, you have to say no to some really good stuff. It's not just like bad stuff or distractions. Sometimes distractions look really attractive.
Yep.
Like oh man, this is like a really great opportunity, but it's not the greatest one that I have.
You and I have had dozens of those conversations where you would call and say, hey, we got this opportunity for an RFP. It's in a vertical that we don't currently have enough work in to like really say, yeah, we do this kind of work for this kind of client. Should we do it? And I think there was probably, our hit rate on that was probably like 20%, right? I think like 2 out of those 10 times we would say, yeah, fuck it, let's give it a shot. Like we'll throw the art, we'll respond and see if we get it. And, we got a couple of those and it was great, and got a couple of those and learned like, oh shit, we actually don't want to be in this vertical and be doing this work. So, that's a very practical thing that you and I have done together over the years. I want to kind of fast forward a little bit through the advertising stuff. So at Circus Maximus, we discovered really through a lot of our own, branding and strategy and iteration internally as a team, that we really discovered like, hey, we launch brands and we launch products, right? And so as you transitioned from Circus Maximus into Launch Party, you built a brand around your core competencies, which is launching brands and products. So can you take us through, because I want to get into Dad Strength Brewing here. Can you take us through a little bit of that process, what you learned at the end of Circus Maximus, what you learned here at Launch Party as you rebranded to tell people that you do exactly what you do, and then deciding that you wanted to then launch your own brand? And how did those feed each other? How did those processes feed each other?
Yeah, I think just because of the way, like where the opportunities came in working at Circus was that we just ended up working with a lot of startups. It was kind of the ZERP era, which means it was the low interest rate era, which means there was a lot of startups being funded, and they needed creative partners. And we just, for whatever reason, fell into that kind of portion of the industry. And as a byproduct, we were working with brands very much at the beginning of their life cycle, like literally maybe didn't even have a product, and we're trying to think about, how do we tell the story of this brand? Very kind of foundational stuff. And so for 10 years, we had these kind of repetitions of working with brands in fintech and consumer packaged goods, alcohol and spirits. And just over 10 years, the pattern recognition of what's really critical for brands at that stage in terms of how they tell their brand story, create their branded environment, like visuals and packaging, and kind of like how they develop a kind of a brand platform, if you will, started to become clear and in a sense standardized. Of like, oh, brands need these things at this stage, the launch, the beginning, and the transition from Circus Maximus to Launch Party was really synthesizing those things, and then also trying to solve some of what I felt the challenges were in the world of advertising, which is agencies all are kind of the same. There's no barrier to entry. They all say they apply creativity, but they aren't specific enough about who they do it for, what they give those brands, how long does it take, and what does it cost. And so I threw all that together, and that became Launch Party. And we basically developed 3 productized services based on 10 years of working with startups that were specifically for startups in 3 categories. So only certain kinds of brands, only certain kinds of services, and standardized pricing at the top, in the pursuit of creating these kind of standard procedures, standard operating systems based on the things that are most valuable to brands that we're launching. And in doing that, like the little kind of motivating thing was like, well, man, if we know how to do all that, what if we just created products and put them through this system ourselves? And just in natural conversation with a friend of mine who I've known for a really long time, we've always batted ideas back and forth because he's an entrepreneur too. He had restaurants in the DC area, and he had sold his restaurants, and, Launch Party was kind of at this inflection point as well about 2 years ago, a year ago. And we had this idea, and we were like, damn, this is a pretty good idea, which is, it was certainly like self-diagnosed, but we're 2 old guys. We're like 45. We've always enjoyed craft beer, but he and I would talk about how it's like, man, this stuff is like moonshine, 6, 7, 8, 9%. I can't really drink like I used to. Plus I've got kids. It's irresponsible to have 2 or 3 of those. And then you're not ready to be a good father, when duty calls, and then you're hungover, or maybe you get bad sleep. Why isn't there like this? Why isn't there a beer for us, basically? And that gnawing conversation kind of led us to, we started mixing together regular beer and non-alcoholic beer to create this kind of low ABV version. And then we were like, man, I think this might need to be a thing that we bring into the world. And we knew how to do it because we had like the branding experience and the marketing experience. So that became Dad Strength. And it started as kind of a side hustle, like, I don't want to say distraction, but it was this little thing that we were fueling. And then we brought in a brewer to help us create it. And then it was pretty good. And then we did a friends and family launch to see if anyone liked it. And people did. And then we brought it into the market. And the reason why we're in Washington, D.C., without boring your audience, is like, it's one of a handful of small markets that allows you as a manufacturer of an alcoholic product to sell directly to retailers. So we could take it from the brewery, put it in our truck, drive to, Joe Schmo's bar and be like, hey, try this, you should have it. And people liked it. And so, yeah, I mean, we sort of accidentally made ourselves a little business here. And then it was like, I think maybe it's time to really focus on this. And so that's kind of where we are today. And it's called Dad Strength Brewing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we blew through. I mean, as a part of that friends and family launch, we ordered 3 cases last summer and blew through it at the kind of like tail end of when we got to the last case. We had family in town, so dads and uncles, right? And like people were doing some. I remember I was like, oh, I'll bring this 3rd case over to somebody's house that we were going to, like a pool party, and all the me and some of the other dads and uncles and stuff were hanging out. And next thing I know, I look at the pool and I see that on the side it's just littered with all these Dad Strength empty cans, but everybody was feeling great, right? Like both feeling great in the sense of like, yeah, I mean, you get a little bit of a buzz because there's alcohol in it, but feeling great because it was craft beer that was light, that wasn't heavy, and everybody was enjoying it. So we're obviously in Ohio and can't get regular access to it yet, but
well, hopefully soon. So that's a more recent unlock for us, is that we're hopefully going to be available direct to consumer in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Kentucky, hopefully here in the next 2 months. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where it's like when someone else has an idea, and I've been worked in advertising for 20 years, and it's a good idea, you kind of get excited for them, and you're like, you should do this and that and this and that. And then when it's your own, you're very you second guess yourself. You're like, is this stupid? Does anyone really want this? And so everything that we've done is basically a test to confirm that we're not idiots. Yeah. And we still might be idiots, but the response has been good. We're in Trader Joe's, we're in Whole Foods, we're in Giant, we're in over 150 retailers. And so like the adoption of it, and, I mean, it's kind of a humbling experience, to be honest with you, because we talked a lot about how long, my career has been in advertising and working on really big brands. And then I spent the last 6 months basically in the beer section of grocery stores and independent liquor stores, begging people to try this beer. It's like, man, I didn't picture my career going this direction, but it's been really fun. It's actually one of the most fun parts of the job, is like being there, having people try it and be like, oh my God, this is pretty good. Yeah,
it's probably a refreshing experience to get out of boardrooms with C-suite who are telling you what their consumer actually likes and actually thinks and actually wants, what they think their consumer thinks, what they think their consumer wants, what they think their consumer needs. And you're back on the ground with the people being like, hey, try this thing. Because entrepreneurship at its core is solving a problem for yourself first and then scaling that solution for a consumer base, right? In this case, I fit right within that bucket. I'm a dad, got an almost 5-year-old, got another one on the way. And I still want to drink some beers and have a good time, and enjoy that taste and do that thing. But I have responsibilities, both that come with being a dad and getting older and wanting to be responsible for my body and my well-being long-term. Right. And so you solved a problem for yourself, and then you scaled a solution for people in your community, in your consumer set, right, that would want it. And it turns out people do.
Yeah, it's like we go back to what we were saying at the beginning. If a business is really just the solution that people are willing to pay for. And for us, this was one that was like, everyone knows we're all trying to drink less, right? Like whether it's dry January or whether you recently read the article about the Surgeon General and how bad, alcohol can be for you, or you're just trying to lose a few pounds, or whatever your motivation is. It's like almost everyone's trying to drink less.
Yeah.
And then you're like, but man, I love beer. And man, yeah. I do enjoy the ritual of having a few beers after work. I enjoy the relaxation, or I enjoy the camaraderie, or I enjoy the community, the social event of it, or I love the way that it enhances an experience, or playing golf with the buddies, or whatever. So on one hand, like I'm supposed to do less of this activity, but on the other hand, it's pretty important to me that I still do it. And we're offering something that solves both of those challenges, right? Where it's like, what if you could drink less, but you didn't really have to drink less? And then it's also low calorie, which is great. So, yeah, I mean, I think I look back too, there was one experience I had in the world of advertising where you're kind of throwing these ideas out. And I have a deck from 2011 in which we shared an idea with a prominent vodka brand. And we were like, you guys probably do vodka soda in a can. And they were like, no one wants it. We can't do it. Laughed me out of the room. And then vodka soda in a can as a concept became the largest growth sector of the alcohol and beverage industry in the last 12 years. And I'm like, if I had just executed on that idea instead of trying to convince someone else to do it, imagine what could have happened. And that just kind of stuck in my head. So that's why we were like, let's go for it,
Yeah, it's one of the cool things about working in advertising is kicking around ideas like that, right? And those ideas are always living in the back of our head as we work through that process. And then if we're smart and we save our decks and we archive all of our work, right? Like those things are then tangible that we can go back and look at and grab and either feed the next campaign or the next idea, the next thing that we're working on for a client, or feed one of our own business ideas. On the business front, working with your business partner, what has that partnership been like? You bring the kind of brand and product marketing sense to it. He brings the retail experience and sense to it. You guys are old friends. What is that marriage been like between the two of you? What was it like at the beginning? And I know you're still at the beginning, but what was it like initially? And then how are you two working through all of those things together as you divide and conquer?
Yeah, it's a good question because, we're old friends. We're also both guys that had run our own businesses and probably have that individualist streak. And I think there was a lot of conversation at the beginning about like, how is this partnership going to work? Are we going to clash? Here's how I like to do things. Here's how I like, are comparing and contrasting experiences. And we have a lot of overlapping skills. I mean, he's a very talented marketer. He's a fun guy. He likes to create, kind of fun brands. And so, we actually just hashed it out a lot of like, what are your expectations financially? What are your expectations in terms of the role that you're going to play at this company? And what are your expectations for how we functionally create, the architecture of this business? Down to like I don't like to text. I need Sundays off. So we really, I think we're able to benefit from having had these experiences as individual founders to come together. Now, there's still been clash. We have different communication styles, or sometimes we find ourselves arguing the same side of a point. It's weird. But I think a lot of the challenges too, and I'm like, probably you could Google an article in which I said everything's going to be remote from here on out. But I will say the coming together of the two of us to be in physical spaces at the same time solves a lot of problems because you're able to communicate much more quickly, clearly, and effectively when you're sitting with one another in the same room. So we're literally like, as I say that, I'm in a hotel and we're moving into our office. So like, this is the year that hopefully we double down and this business becomes real. We're going to have a headquarters and we're going to have a place to work. But that solved a lot of those challenges. And then, I'd say he's a really organized guy, like hyper organized, even more so than myself. That's
not saying much.
Fair enough. I keep a lot. I have a lot of things that I keep in my own head, and that you come to realize is like, and in my own kind of journey, that's probably frustration when you and I work together, where it's like, I've heard the feedback of like, he's not really. He has these expectations, but he's not being like, I can see it so clearly in my own head. I forget that I actually have to tell people what I'm thinking.
Well, and I think you and I work well together because I'm the same way. And so therefore I'm able to reciprocate that pretty easily. So, hey, you remember that thing that we did? And then I'll be like, yeah, here's the deck. And you're like, yep, that's the one. All right, copy it. Blah, 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 blah. You and I are able to work together well on that front. So yeah, no, just joshing you on the organizational front. But so in terms of the consumer set, what have you learned about yourself as a dad? What have you learned about dads as a consumer set as you market to them and sell to them? And any insights there that you've learned?
Some of them, I guess, because the insights of like, all right, dads are stressed. dads are looking for a little release, in the form of a round of golf, in the form of a barbecue, in the form of whatever you can take, basically. and parents in general. And that's probably true of moms, right? Where it's like you have your life as an individual adult human, and then you have your life as the individual adult human is gone, and now you are the caretaker of a child, and that is a 24-hour position. And those two, like reconciling that is really challenging, because you're just looking for moments where you can still enjoy like hanging with your buddies, or just literally doing nothing, or maybe just, simple activities that you used to be able to enjoy whenever you wanted now are kind of scheduled in, and so there's this desire to have moments of recreation or relaxation. However, you're at tension with your responsibilities. And in some cases, your biology as we get older, So it's like, I know that if I have 2 beers tonight, I'm going to pay the consequences tomorrow. And that's going to be amplified by my responsibilities. So that's really the insight. That's proven to be true, both on a personal level and from the people that we talk to, which is that it's like, oh, we're giving you a little bit of, maybe not freedom, but we're giving you a little bit of like relaxation back. And if you think about what the brand really offers, it is that. It's that moment of community, moment of relaxation, moment of pause, moment of separation between work and home life or whatever. So we're kind of giving that back to dads in a safe way. So that's kind of the insight of like the psychological motivation behind the brand. And definitely, I mean, yeah, I have an 18-month-old, and it is just a complete whirlwind.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about it is like you're splitting the difference, right? Like, so for instance, my wife is pregnant right now, and I'm choosing not to drink any alcohol until the baby is born. I did that when she was pregnant with Isla as well, and it's not in solidarity. It's not like that because she'll have a glass of wine or something here and there. For me, it's just an opportunity to reset, right? And alcoholism runs in my family and past generations, and so even as I tended bar, I would always take 4 to 6 weeks off at a time every year or so, just to make sure. I do the same thing with coffee, right? Like, I'm very intentional about that. And so I love that you're splitting the difference, because Athletic Brewing exists and all these other non-alcoholic brands exist, and I'm getting fed a ton of them now. On the liquor side or fake liquor or whatever that's called. But you guys are splitting the difference, where you're like, hey, you can have some alcohol right here. This isn't a 0-sum game. It's not binary, right? Like you're allowed to do this, and it brings the ritual back into it. I'm a big happy hour guy, right? That's the thing I miss the most. I don't miss binge drinking, right? I miss happy hour. I miss having a glass or two of wine with Andrea at the end of the day as we make dinner, or a couple of beers. Like, that's the thing that I miss right now. That's going to be valuable for me to miss over the course of the next several months, right, as we do this. And that's part of why I do what I do. But for what you guys are building is like, hey, you can have those rituals, you can have those things. And then now we're equipping you with a little bit more opportunity to be responsible with the way that you're doing it.
Yeah, it's literally, it was like you walk down the beer aisle and it's like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 0. And you're kind of going like, why are we missing this big swath right here? And I mean, another way to think about it is like microdosing alcohol.
Right.
And, I gave up drinking altogether for 4 years. And I remember having this experience where I was with a friend of mine. We were in New York City. We were at the Final Four early tournament thing. It was like a Tuesday night, had a couple beers. And then I was like, we ended up like jumping over the velvet rope, like, but 38 at this age, right, too, by the way. So it's like, this is like college kid behavior, but like, we snuck into the VIP where we were like picking over some ancient buffalo chicken fingers. And I'm sitting there like, what am I doing? And the next day I stopped drinking, and I was like, I'm going to just give this up for a month. It was like right before my birthday. And it ended up lasting for 4 years. And what I realized was like, my sleep is better. I'm happier. I'm able to manage my diet better. Kind of basically in every way, my life is improved. And so there was this insight around like, yeah, maybe I do need to drink a little bit less. And then ultimately I realized, but you know what? I actually enjoy having a beer and a burger, or I like having a glass of wine and some pizza. So maybe there's this middle path, right? Like maybe it doesn't have to be so extreme. The answer might not be none. Maybe the answer is some. But that wasn't really available. But what we know is that people that are drinking non-alcoholic beer, almost 93% of them still drink alcohol. So they're looking for less. They're not looking for none. And our proposition is to give you the best of both worlds, to let you land on that hopefully ideal amount. Just giving you your units of alcohol, your alcohol budget in smaller pieces that gives you the opportunity to manage it how you want. And sort of our belief that a lot of people are out there shopping their beverages by ABV. Like if I go to a bar, they tell me what the ABV is. I almost always look for the lowest one because I'm like 9%, dude, not possible. You know what I mean? Do you have anything in the 4? And so we ours is 2.9, and that's the sweet spot of like, okay, if I drink them real fast, you catch a little buzz or whatever, or like maybe you have one big beer and then you have a couple of these. There's different ways to basically use the alcohol units in a way that previously didn't exist. It's really just about giving people that option.
Yeah, I mean, that scales across verticals, right? Like that's one of my favorite things about the internet and capitalism is the opportunity for all these D2C brands, right? Where you don't have to, like in the sports space, right? You're not now reliant on Nike and Adidas and Under Armour. Well, there's a bunch of, brands that are owned by different people at a smaller level that have figured out how to use the materials that exist, and you can diversify your wardrobe, you can diversify your food, you can diversify your CP, whatever it is. As a consumer, we now have the freedom to go choose some of these other options, now myriad other options, instead of just relying on the biggest players in the game.
Yeah, I mean, one solution for every problem is just not the way it's supposed to work, right? It's like the market always wins. And the market these days is about identifying a niche and really catering to that niche's problem solution. In this case, it's dads, but it's also, we found, moms like it too.
Yeah.
And so do a lot of other people that understand where this dad strength solves an occasional opportunity. I want to go out to a concert, have a couple beers. I want to go play pool my league play on a Monday night. I want to go play golf with the guys. I want to relax on a Friday night, but I just don't want the consequences, and it's like those kinds of solutions, I think, are really compelling. There's a lot more of them because the way the internet has kind of nicheified the world, they're just being surfaced on a regular basis. I mean, look at your thing with the veteran community. It's like, that's not a solution for everybody. It's a solution very, very specific audience, but it's really salient for that audience. And I think that's another way that the advertising world has changed a lot as well. It's like recognizing that there'll be a lot more solutions, a lot more brands, but they might be a little bit smaller, but super powerful.
Yeah, it's becoming less and less geared towards convincing people to want a certain thing, and it's morphed into meeting people where they are to give them what they actually want.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. It's like there's the book called like The Art of Persuasion, and I don't think persuasion is a part of it at all. You can't convince someone to like something, but you might help them recognize what they want,
Yeah.
Or what they're looking for if it doesn't exist. So that problem solution thing, I think that's a fundamental shift in the world of advertising, and probably also a reason why I started to sort of say, like, I'm not super convinced on the future of this business model or this business in general. Is like, I think that the idea that you can just blast messages at people and get them to do something was kind of the industrial mindset of the advertising industry for a long time. And now it's much more about like, no, what you need to do is you need to give people something of value, and communicate that value rather than like, mass market shitty products.
Yeah, well said. I think probably good a place as any to start to wrap things up. Before I get to open-ended question I ask at the end of every episode, Ryan, where can folks find you? Where can folks find Dad Strength? Where do you want to drive traffic, social, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so Instagram is Dad Strength Brewing, at Dad Strength Brewing, dadstrengthbrewing.com. If you're in DC, if you're in Maryland, soon to be Virginia, you can find us at over 150 retail locations, including Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Giant. You can also order direct to consumer in DC and Virginia. And like I said, soon coming to Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Kentucky.
Let's go. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just in time for the summer when I can start to sip again. So Ryan, to end each episode of the podcast, I ask a question. It is geared specifically towards the veteran community, but in this case, I think you can adjust it as you want, maybe for entrepreneurs or for creatives, or just hear the question and answer it however you want to. But I ask, what's on your heart and your mind for our community? It could be a piece of advice, something you want to get off your chest, or something you want to reiterate that we've already talked about today. But Ryan, what's on your heart? What's on your mind?
Man, my first inclination to answer that is kind of cheesy, but I think it's like, now's the time to do it. I think everyone's like, there's never been there's never been a better time to kind of pursue that business idea, or, you've never been given more tools to kind of craft the life that you hope to have for yourself. It's not going to be easy, but I would recommend that everyone that's got that thing in their mind that they want to do, especially in January, right? It's like, find a way to get it done this year.
Yeah.
Because it's rewarding, even if you fail, and I have failed a lot. Even if you fail, you grow and you learn. So I think take the chance on yourself to do that thing that you've been thinking about doing.
That's not cheesy at all. I think that's a great answer, and I think it works for service members, veterans, and for creatives and entrepreneurs, kind of all at once, right? Like, start the process, right? Don't you said do the thing that's on your mind. Well, you don't have to do all of it right now. Yeah. Start the process. Start it. Chunk it out.
Every time, man. I was just printing out a return slip for my 1-800-contacts yesterday, and I was at the basement Xerox machine, and there was a conference for college kids looking to get a job in cybersecurity. So, a very specific story that I'm telling. But man, one of them had already started a business in college, and I was like, man, this is incredible. Like, I don't even know why you're kind of at this conference, but anyway, the summary of the story is that when people take that leap and do stuff, it's always kind of compelling. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I'm always like, man, I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that did it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, every old rich person would trade places with a young poor person immediately. All these like younger poor people who are on the come up, like, oh, I wish I could be Warren Buffett and have all that money and be able to do all those things. Well, he actually wants to be you, because he wants to go do it all again and have another shot at life, have another shot at those opportunities, have another shot at those failures as well as the successes. So yeah, just get started and do it. Don't waste any more time not starting.
Climb the mountain, baby.
Yeah. All right. Well, tell Rudder thank you for being patient for this hour. Ryan, appreciate your time, appreciate your energy, appreciate the opportunity to have worked for and with you over the years. I've told you offline, and I think I've said it on the podcast before. I looked at my career as, serving the military, going to film school, getting into advertising. The first couple of people I worked for, I felt like I got my MBA working for them, and I feel like I got my PhD working for you. Back to that on the job training, and obviously we still work together in some capacities from time to time. So I appreciate you and your friendship, man.
Likewise, man. Thank you for having me on the show. This is a good example of you doing the podcast, and I'm like, man, I got to be doing that. So it's awesome to watch, and you guys are crushing it. So I appreciate you keeping me involved.
Thanks, brother. All right, we'll see you.
Peace.